Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. We're going to begin our discussion today first talking about temperatures, and I'm going to take you back to this past weekend, where on Saturday morning, some of the temperatures right here in the eastern Great Lakes Basin did drop below freezing. We can see that based on the color coding here, the number of hours spent below 32 degrees Fahrenheit from the RTMA data. So there was some patchy frost in pockets of the eastern Corn Belt here. And what I want to talk about is kind of the evolution of the forecast temperature pattern we saw from last week. First thing I'd like to do is I want to take you to a research publication. This was by Professor Zhang here. He's at Penn State. And what I want to point out about his research is this figure right here. It's one of the most important ones we've got because numerical weather prediction does the bulk of weather forecasting out to about 10 days. And it's amazing what it's capable of doing. I mean, rewind the clock just a decade or 2 decades ago, getting a reliable 36-hour forecast was not there. But take a look at this graphic. What it's showing you here in these 4 different bands of colors is the historical performance of the European model, which statistically is our best performing global model. Now, the top color here represents the forecast skill out 3 days, looking at its ability to predict the jet stream level pattern. And it's high, about 97%. The day 5 envelope is right in through here, and it's sitting about 92-93%. But notice the day 7, it's about 78%, and the day 10, which is somewhere around 50%. The point that I want to share with you here is that using numerical weather prediction alone to forecast, when you get past about day 5, day 7, the skill drops off. So what we have is a few techniques to enhance this. And those techniques are around ensemble forecasting and also around teleconnections. So let's talk about the teleconnections first. Now, in my forecast videos last week, we discussed how the MJO, after getting stuck in phase 7, was going to pop out into phase 8. Now, phase 8 is historically correlated with warmer temperatures east of the Rocky Mountains, and we saw that, especially over this weekend. But we knew it was going to go into phase 1 and eventually into phase 2. I made a point to say that it wasn't going to go high amplitude into phase 2 and 3, which means the MJO is over the Indian Ocean. Had it done that, that would have been a very strong signal for cold conditions to start the month of May. We saw, no, instead it was going to try to come back somewhere here toward null space and maybe pop out over here near Australia or even over the Western Pacific. And those would have been important signals to look out for that May forecast time period. Another piece I added to this was I said if we look at the jet stream level flow, well, it seemed to be open, more zonal, more west to east flowing. And the jet stream was looking something like this in the forecast graphics I had available to me last Thursday. We were watching this trough because that trough, as we were forecasting it for the end of this week, did bring in the risk of cooler weather, again, out of the Canadian prairie into the eastern half of the United States. But I said that trough, while deep, isn't stuck. It's not going to stay there. But the models over the weekend took that trough and did this with it. It's now considerably deeper. All right. Is the flow still unblocked? Yeah, it still is. I'm kind of tracing it out here. That's the jet stream level flow. You can count them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and generally 5 waves orbiting the North Pole. Now, when we think about that, the more waves there are, the shorter their wavelength. And shorter wavelength troughs progress east in the flow, whereas the longer wavelength troughs tend to retrograde or even get stuck or move west. All right? But the fact of the matter is this trough deepened, and it's the forecast trough for the end of this week. And what that gets me concerned about is what the temperatures are going to be doing. So last week, what I had available to me to tell you what this week's temperature pattern was going to look like came from the GFS ensemble. The European ensemble looked very similar. We were going to be letting some of that cold air out of the Canadian prairie out. It was going to help deepen the trough over the Great Lakes Basin. But at that time, I had compared it to 2020 because we did not want to see a repeat of early May 2020 in the Eastern Corn Belt. And we, at that point, didn't see the models nor the teleconnections giving us a strong signal to be worried about widespread, deep frost freeze conditions. Well, this is the new update on that through the next 5 days. And while it is still there, the depth of that trough, well, you now know it's quite deep. So we're going to be bringing in more cooler air on the back side of it, and we need to see what that's going to do. So that's going to add to an April forecast, which I've confessed to you was a bit of a bust for me. After the first week of April through Easter Sunday, which was so warm, we really saw the pattern evolve, getting stuck in phase 7 with the MJO, and that just was the strongest teleconnection, bringing in the cooler conditions. Well, now if we take a look at that, knowing that really the only place that was warm was down here in the desert southwest, we can go out there and look at what this temperature pattern is going to do this week. So we're going to start off with overnight lows. This is this morning. So Monday morning lows, let's go from there into Tuesday morning. When you look at this, I put a couple of white contours on each of these graphics. The one to the south here is the 70-degree isotherm. The one that's to the north is the 32-degree isotherm. What we're going to watch here is that overnight low temperature getting below 32. We see it's going to hit the northern plains and upper Midwest, getting into northern Wisconsin, possibly closer to the Illinois-Wisconsin border on Wednesday morning. From there, as we go into Thursday, again, we keep the northern tier of the U.S. right into this area with those below freezing temperatures. And from there into Friday and now Saturday, my concern is going to be, we're going to watch this all week, do we bring in enough cold air to hit the southern part of Michigan, northern Indiana, and Ohio, with the potential for another frost? Now, this would be quite late for that area. All right, but this is what we need to be watching through the end of this week. I can supplement that forecast by looking at the European ensemble. This is the probability of having a temperature below freezing. So when you look at it, we're looking for these colors here. That would give us a high probability of a sub-freezing temperatures. There's Monday morning. Let's now get out to Tuesday morning. So we're going to hit the northern plains here on Tuesday morning with a frost, which is normal for this time of year for them. As we then get into Wednesday morning, let's go from there into Thursday morning. There we are. Now we start to see it coming into the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes Basin. This is now getting into Friday morning's overnight lows and then into Saturday morning here. And that's the morning I'm most concerned about this week, bringing in those cold temperatures. But as I said, the pattern is not blocked up. So if we do bring in patchy frost into this area and into the Northeast on Saturday morning, it appears that it moves out quickly. Do you see as I go through early next week, we tend to moderate the pattern and the risk advances to the north with it. Okay, given all of that, let's now talk about the near-term weather before I come back to the temperatures again at the end. And what I want to do for you here is I want to show you yesterday's severe storm reports. Quite a bit of it coming out of the high plains. Big thunderstorms last night stretched right in through this area, and we did have an outbreak of tornadoes that moved through parts of Mississippi. Taking a look at this here on our kind of first going over here to some high-resolution satellite data. It's this upper level low, I'll kind of rock back and forth here, that came out of Texas, soaking Texas at the end of last week and this weekend, that moved to the east. A couple things to take note of here. You can see the large storms blowing up right here through Mississippi. But on the back side of it, almost in like a ring around this whole area in through here saw some very large storms. And as the sun was setting, there was one in parts of, well, Nebraska, Colorado, and Kansas, which was just amazing. It's a storm right in through here. Look at the size of the anvil on the top of this storm, just radiating outwards. That's a lot of upper level kind of exhausting air getting deep into the troposphere here. Well, this system, as it curled through in the overnight hours into the mid-Mississippi River Valley over toward the Ohio River Valley, was putting down quite a bit of rainfall. And what I've got here is the current, this is this morning, radar image. You can see quite a bit of scattered precip here. But if I take you back to yesterday, look at how this all evolved. There's the severe storms through Mississippi. Now you see that big arcing ring that came out of Colorado, moved through Kansas and Nebraska. Big storms last night right into this area here, getting us into the early morning hours here. All right, so that's where we're going to stop with this. Now, looking at the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation, remember we had the stalled out boundary here giving us the flooding problems in this region. And then our cutoff low, which just sat here over the weekend, has now emerged. It's been picked up with the flow and it is out. And you don't quite see the total amount of rainfall that came with those storms in this corridor last night, but they did hit some very dry fields over the last couple of weeks. In fact, let me show it to you. Last 14 days of precipitation in terms of percent of normal. That was an area that saw no rain for the last 2 weeks that we brought in those big storms last night. And it did extend back here into a region like this into parts of Kansas. Again, big storms in through here. The heavy rains in Texas, you can see the effect of them taking this area well above 350% of normal precipitation for the last 2 weeks. We were drier over here in the mid-Atlantic, into North Carolina, and we're just going to watch to see what we can do to help erase this major drought concern for the northern plains. We're going to talk about that more in just a few moments. Meanwhile, the west weak flow has really kept it from getting any sort of late April precipitation here. And that's why when we go look at the April statistics, so this is April 1 through May 3rd, the West Coast likely had its driest or second driest April on record across the West again. And we do notice those pockets in Iowa, Wisconsin, southeastern Minnesota, also down in the Panhandles in southern Kansas. Very, very dry month of April. And you can see that extends in the eastern Corn Belt. That extends in the mid-Atlantic. Very few regions exceptionally wet. And where they were, right in through here and right down here. And then this weekend, there. All right. So from there, why don't we move forward and take a look here at where this pattern's going. What we're going to do first is go to the European model and look over the next 15 days. You see, the model is picking up on something like this, that being the wettest corridor, and heavy rainfall coming into this part where the Mississippi and Ohio River and Missouri all come together, right in through this area into the Tennessee Valley. The GFS model has something similar. You can see almost an identical pattern. But of note, the GFS is more aggressive at returning moisture farther to the north. So let's go take a look at what that's going to give us. First of all, it's kind of a famous day in atmospheric sciences. Back on May 3rd, 1999, the jet stream was in a large ridge in the Gulf of Alaska that dove down like this, met up with a piece of the subtropical jet stream, and the strong winds went right here across the southern plains. Nearer to the surface, we had a low-level jet that was screaming across the Red River Valley of the south, bringing in wind speeds here that were getting up there in that pretty high values. We're talking about 15 to 20 meters per second. So our low-level jet here was cranking at speeds approaching at times almost 40 to 50 miles an hour. And the end result was this tornado. Now, for those of us that were being educated in the early 2000s, this was in every one of our textbooks. And what it is here is it's a view of the Bridge Creek to Newcastle to Moore, Oklahoma EF5 or F5 tornado, which to date, I believe still holds the records for the strongest winds ever observed in a tornado. And there was the hook echo on the back side of this. Well, right now where we stand, let's kind of shrink that up again, where we stand on tornado count this year is that the second half of May, in fact, the last 3 weeks of April did not see a lot of severe weather. It's only ramped up here just lately again. But where we're going through the month of May and June, remember, this is where we have the steepest slope on the accumulation of our tornado reports here. So we're going to watch out for this carefully. And this is what the jet stream's doing today. Well, we're going to watch two things. Watch the flow coming off this ridge. That's going to be critical for the northern plains. But there is a deep trough here, and that's the trough that's kicked that upper level low out, but it's going to be providing a setup here for some strong to severe storms to the south. And of course, the Storm Prediction Center is all on top of this. We're going to watch out for some discrete supercell development here over in the Texas Panhandle, and then a mixed mode of precipitation tonight coming out here into parts of Arkansas, the Missouri Valley, through the Ozarks, and then pushing here eventually into the Ohio River Valley. All right. Getting into the day tomorrow, and this is what things look like on the 4th. The upper level low is going to move toward the northeast. We're going to leave a lingering boundary through this area and once again target this part of Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee with more severe weather. And that place has been hit hard so far in 2021. So high-res NAM first. What we're going to notice here is that through early this morning, there's the widespread leftovers from the upper level low still moving out of Tennessee, Kentucky, but getting into the eastern Corn Belt here. On the backside of it, there is an upper level low that's moving through parts of Colorado. And there's a pressure trough tucked in between the two. So possibly through midday today, bringing in some more rainfall into parts of Iowa. It's scattered, but more rainfall into Iowa. And you saw that that's an area that's been dry for the last 2 weeks. As we work our way through the afternoon into the evening, we're going to watch the destabilization of the atmosphere over the Texas Panhandle. So our severe storms starting off here first. But through that pressure trough, you can see that the storms could extend up into parts, for example, into Illinois. And as we then move through the overnight hours, the trickiest thing to do, and we're going to have to nowcast through this, is to watch in the overnight hours for possibly mixed mode, could get quasi-linear convective systems or squall lines moving through the Red River Valley, and then moving through parts of Missouri over toward the Ohio River. And you can see all the little line segments there in the overnight hours. Well, as we then work our way into the morning, that trough kicks out through Missouri, brings the precipitation tomorrow through Illinois and out of Kansas. And then we're going to see the southern front on this kick off tomorrow afternoon, the potential for more strong to severe storms. And then as we work our way forward, that moves right through part of the Cotton Belt down here and eventually heads off to the southeast. Now, remember that wave I told you to watch coming through parts of Washington? Possibly on Wednesday morning, it could bring in some moisture here to parts of North Dakota. Desperately needed. Could there be some mixed precip? There most certainly could be. But that's where that wave eventually ended up. To see where it goes from there, European model. We've already seen this. This is getting through Monday, now through Tuesday, and into Wednesday morning. Let's stop it right there. So that system is now elongating up the East Coast, watching for showers and storms to the south of it. Some could be severe down here. But early Wednesday morning, there's our mixed precip coming through parts of North Dakota. Where does this all go? Well, let's get through the day on Wednesday. This is now Wednesday evening, getting into overnight hours. That wave could move through parts of southern Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, bringing in some light precip here. That, again, is Thursday morning, afternoon, and evening. So that could skirt through the eastern Corn Belt eventually in the eastern Great Lakes Basin. But then as we emerge toward this weekend, what I'm going to be paying attention to is the potential for low-pressure development right here coming off the mountains. Now, we saw the first system exit the east and still bringing in some wetter conditions there, and we know it's going to be cool. But this next low coming out right here on Saturday morning, getting into the afternoon and evening, appears to have a frontal boundary stretched on the northern side of it from really the Ohio River Valley straight through here to parts of Montana. Now, at this particular point, with this low developing, I want to know if we have some multi-model support for it, because there will be higher pressure over to the southeast. We're going to feed this in. We could bring up the risk of severe storms here, but return of moisture into that area again. Does the GFS buy into it? It does. A little bit deeper of a low in place here, but there is some sense of that frontal boundary stuck into that area. But the GFS quickly wants to deepen this low over this part of Illinois. And as a result of it, it brings in the risk of storms and heavy rainfall into pockets of the eastern Corn Belt and possibly cold enough air for some snow on the backside of it here. What does the European do? Well, let's just work our way through the weekend. Not quite the same setup. It's farther to the south, and there's no deep low development. But there is the persistent rain through this pocket of the central and eastern Corn Belt getting into the weekend. So we need to watch that carefully. And with the cooler weather coming in, we can see that here in parts of Wyoming, we could be talking about some more snow again early next week. Okay, from there, let's kind of stitch this all together. This graphic now shows you through the next 7 days total accumulated precipitation from the European model. We see that through the central part of the U.S., lower Mississippi River Valley, then culminating here into these systems kind of gathering into the northeast. This is where we're going to see the wetter conditions. The GFS, most important difference that I can see is that it's returning more moisture to parts of North and South Dakota. And that's a critical area to return the moisture to. But the Europeans farther to the south. All right. What about week 2? Well, getting out there to the day 10 time period, this is the jet stream flow. We still notice there's a bit of a trough here. The first trough exits. That's why I told you it's not blocked. It's getting out of there. But it's not exactly being replaced by a large ridge to bring the temperatures back up. And the European sees the same thing. That ridge is here. So there's a trough here, and the first trough is exiting. That is the trough that got stuck over here for like 8 to 10 days a year ago in early May. It's not. It's out. But as it leaves, you can see that the European model keeps this corridor on the wetter side of things into week 2. And this is an area that we've just been talking about has recently received, especially right in through here, an enormous amount of precipitation. The European is drier in the northern plains. What about the GFS? Well, it's got that same look. Can you see it? But it returns more moisture farther to the north. And unfortunately, in both models through this entire time period, the west is dry. We don't see much precipitation returning there at all through that time period. All right, let's now finish up our discussion by going over the next 2 weeks in terms of temperatures. We're going to start with high temperatures. The east gets to enjoy a few more days of the warmth, but already the high plains, getting into the northern plains today, cool. As we stretch this forward, look at the temperatures really skyrocketing here in the Central Valley, already getting into the low 90s on Tuesday. While the cooler air moves through the midsection of the country, the mid-Atlantic through the northeast still seeing some warmer conditions here. But that's going to change for Wednesday. Look at the heat coming into the Central Valley of California down here toward Arizona. And as we go from there into the day on Thursday and Friday and Saturday, that's the day I'm most concerned about the risk of frost here around the Great Lakes Basin. We're going to watch that carefully, and then we'll work our way into Sunday. What about the day 5 through 10? Well, both the GFS and the European keep this corridor cooler, warmer to the south, warmer to the west, especially in California. This is what the GFS has got. We're cooler in the interior, cooler across the northern tier, warmer to the south. Very, very similar picture between our models. Going out there to day 10 through 15. Again, the models are most consistent with the warmer conditions being to the west, but things wash out to the east overall as we work our way to the middle of this month. That's the GFS, and here's the European. Very, very limited on getting a strong signal out there to day 15. What do we see going to the middle of the month? Well, I'll finish with this one last graphic. This now gets us out there to May 16th to the 23rd. The most consistent picture is the warmth in the west and the cooler conditions possibly in the Canadian prairie. Until the MJO pops out of that null space and gets us over to the warmer phases, I think that's going to be what our pattern is going to look like. Okay, a lot today. I appreciate your attention. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you on Thursday. Thanks.